Hey everyone, you're listening to The Talent Revolution, where we believe that focusing on quality over volume and being different, not better, is the right way to hire the best humans and build stronger teams. To help you do this, I go behind the scenes with forward-thinking recruiters, employer brand experts, and people leaders that are making huge differences to their organizations. I'm your host, Tom Hackwell, and on today's episode, I'll be speaking with Esther Odejimi-Uzokwe. Esther's program director at 10,000 Black Interns, affectionately known as 10KBI. 10KBI helps businesses transform the horizons and prospects of young black people in the UK by offering paid work experience across a range of industries, as well as world-class training and development. Prior to 10KBI, Esther graduated from Oxford University with a degree in theology and religion, where she also launched a social enterprise aimed at increasing the black pipeline into Oxford, Cambridge and other top-tier universities. After graduating, she joined the city as an investment banker, because that's pretty much what everybody else did, left after 2 years and resumed life as an entrepreneur before joining 10KBI. She's East London born and bred, plays the drums and was born with 6 fingers on her left hand. Esther, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me.
No, look, really appreciate that. Look, there's a fascinating story in that intro there. Would love just to spend a couple of minutes on kind of your journey to date and how you've got to 10KBI.
I'll definitely say in secondary school, I was that girl that was always stood outside the classroom because she had been sent out for talking too much or,
Sounds familiar.
Resource-wise, they weren't really prepped to send people to the best institutions, if that makes sense.
It does.
I remember receiving a lot of pushback as well, educationally, from particular members of staff at the school who didn't think that I should be aiming for particular universities. And it's really linked to what we're going to discuss today, I think, in terms of where it starts educationally with a lot of the diversity that we see or that we don't see really in the corporate world. There was an open day that Cambridge did, and my school did a trip to the Cambridge Open Day and kind of selected some of the top performers to go. I was one of them. And I, at this point in time, never missed a day of school. So as a result of going to this open day, I missed a day of school. So one of my teachers at the time went through the register, realized I wasn't in the class, and he was like to the class, "Oh, where's Esther?" The other members of the class said, "Oh, she's gone to the Cambridge Open Day." And I kid you not, I get back into school the next day. Of course, all of my friends are going to snitch on the teacher. They came straight to me and they said, "Esther, you'll never guess what XYZ said in the classroom." And I was like, what happened? And they said, basically, after realizing I wasn't in the lesson for about 20 minutes, he put the lesson on pause, scrapped the lesson plan, and decided to host a discussion as to why Esther thinks she's capable of getting into an institution like Cambridge. Don't I understand that people that look like me don't go there? People that speak like me don't go there? All of the above. And this came back to me and I was absolutely livid. And I tell you, that was the first fire underneath my backside that was like, do you know what? Thank you for saying that. Watch.
Yeah, but that's also, well, I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous, right? Obviously, but
wild.
It's also, I think your interpretation of it is awesome and commendable, but sadly not how everybody would interpret an ordeal like that, right? And for us to kind of shine a light on these stories, because it does provide the context that people, I think, really need to understand around why, as you said, we're not seeing diversity, and it starts this early, right? I think people look too late in that journey, and no, thanks for sharing that with us. That's just ridiculous. Absolutely
it's
ridiculous.
Crazy. It is wild, but unfortunately quite common in certain schools,
And do you think that's got better or worse? I mean, that wasn't a long time ago, sadly, but do you think it's changed yet?
I definitely think that, things are better now, particularly because people have been forced to face the truths of this kind of conversation and about diversity and about access. Unfortunately, it took the murder of a black man in public for a lot of these conversations to happen in a lot of rooms. We're there nonetheless. And I think as a result, it's definitely become much more of a focal point, a serious focal point, away from roundtable discussions, or away from panel discussions, like
super abstract concepts, right?
Exactly, actionable points that people are taking on board now. So, in answer to your question, yes, I do think it is changing. Still a long way to go, though. Sure.
What do you see, if anything, like the role organizations can play in this, right? So, and what I mean by that is, we know that we want to solve this problem at source, and obviously excited to learn more about 100 Black Interns and 10,000 Black Interns, and we'll do that in a minute. I guess when we talk about these barriers put in front of you at the educational stage and sometimes even earlier, right? And these challenges around perception and around your belief and ability and your level of normality, I guess, in these environments. Like, is there something that businesses and organizations who are the primary listeners of this can be doing to engage with education to fix this? Or is that like a segregated problem?
I don't think it's a segregated problem at all. I think a lot of this can be boiled down to the matter of visibility and whether or not from a young age, people who look like me or, people who are gay or people who, whatever their difference may be in terms of what the quote unquote norm is, they see people that look like them or identify in the same way that they do within some of these corporations and institutions. And I remember being at the careers fair at university at Oxford, and I walked into, and we're talking, they do it in the town hall, it's massive, you have literally the cream of the crop in terms of firms, whatever that even means these days, representing themselves to apparently the smartest students in the country. And I remember walking in thinking, the stall that I see the first black person at is the stall that I'm going to head to, because I want to hear about what that firm does. And that was my mentality at the time. I'm talking 19, 20-year-old Esther, literally praying to see somebody that looked like me. Walked in there, and unfortunately, no, I kid you not, I did not find a single black person from any of these firms. I'm talking hundreds of firms stood at the stands in the careers fair, and that's genuinely
crazy.
upset me. And I'm not
as it should.
and I'm not the type of person that necessarily looks for that visibility. I'm not of the disposition to care too much as to whether or not I'm the only one in the room. Of course, there are negative effects of that being the situation, but it's not a massive decider in what I do. And at this point in time, I just remember feeling extremely deflated. I walked around all of the stalls, didn't see anyone, faked a few interesting conversations with some people, and literally walked out thinking, absolutely not to any of these firms.
You're saying everybody there didn't look like you, and there wasn't any relatability. Did that reflect the student base at Oxford at the time?
Yeah, it did. Studying such a niche subject from a state comprehensive school, I mean, they don't even offer theology and religion as an A-level. And I remember getting into uni and meeting the other people studying my degree, asking them what their A-levels were, and they were telling me they studied classics, theology and religion, and, all sorts of stuff that I had no idea any academic institution offered at the A-level stage. That being said, one of the ramifications of that reality is that I was the only black person on the entire undergraduate degree. There was one other girl. She was an international student. She dropped out. The only black person in my year group at my college, again, there was another guy who matriculated with us, but unfortunately he dropped out as well and didn't come back. So yeah, it was a reflection, actually.
Well, it's kind of telling, right? But hopefully that changes. And as I say, you've touched on that, and that is changing. But I think, again, it's about awareness as much as anything else, right? And giving people perspective on the challenges and perceptions every stakeholder in this process faces to solve these problems properly.
For sure.
So I think, and we won't dwell on it too much, but you talked about kind of leaving and entering the equity derivative space.
Yeah.
What led you there? Why there?
I was on scholarship with Lloyd's Banking Group, and it was fantastic. Great scholarship program for anyone looking to apply to university. Just a quick shout out. They subsidize your fees, they give you internship opportunities, all of the above. So only because of that scholarship was I aware of what an internship even was, because it was kind of forced onto me as part of the structure of their program. So I did an internship in my second year with them. I then got into my kind of final year, and that's when everyone does their applications if they haven't secured something off of the back of an internship in their final year. The names I heard were all the same. I mean, everybody had the same target firms. It was your Goldmans, your McKinseys. So yeah, that's what everybody did. And I didn't really understand what the other options would be if I decided that that was not the trajectory that I chose for myself. So I put in applications to where everybody puts their applications into, and ended up in equity derivatives in investment banking.
You talk about how social impact is important to you. I think would love to just give the audience a bit more of an understanding of the 100 black interns and 10,000 black interns now, and sort of what the founding story of that is, and what this is there to do.
To clear up any confusion, 100 Black Interns is considered the inaugural program of 10,000 Black Interns. So as an entity, we're referred to as 10,000 Black Interns, or legally 10,000 Black Interns Foundation. We started off as 100 Black Interns, and the story behind that is we have a great set of co-founders, one of them being Jonathan Sorrell, and in the summer of last year, so we're talking less than a year ago, in August, wanted to host a dinner for Black investment managers in the City of London. And quickly realised that out of however many thousand investment managers there are in London, 2,000, 3,000, whatever that number is, if we're lucky, 10 to 15 of them are black. So This is about who is managing the money of the city. There are thousands of people, and amongst them, a very small number are Black people. And this coincided with the murder of George Floyd. And the time absolutely was right to do something tangible about the underrepresentation of Black people in industry. And that's how the idea of 100 Black interns came about. The idea is that the co-founders then came together, joined their contact list together, and literally sat down calling up investment managers to sign up to this program. And inevitably, what they were signing up to was to say that they would hire an intern in a front office revenue generating investment management team for a minimum of 6 weeks in the summer of 2021, paying a minimum of the local living wage, which in London is around £10.80 something an hour or something like that. But of course, it can be more than 6 weeks and it can pay more than the living wage. It was just setting the absolute bare minimum that it must be. Again, and that's really important to actually focus on, because we have a number of firms that still practice unpaid internships, which that's neo-slavery. I don't care whether it's a Black person or white person. That should not be happening in 2021. If you don't have the funds for an intern, then you don't hire an intern. Increase your capacity as a team. It's a substantial amount of time, minimum of 6 weeks, whereby they can use that experience to leverage in their future career, whether it's with that firm or with another firm. So super simple premise, no contract to sign for the firms. And the eligibility criteria from the student perspective is that, of course, you are Black, you are studying at a UK university across any year group of higher educational study, so undergrad or postgrad, or you're a recent graduate or 18 plus post A-level with the intention to study at university. Yeah, they called it 100 Black interns, and the idea was to get 100 firms to sign up to this. And within less than 24 hours, they had more than 100 firms basically calling game and saying they wanted to be involved. They then doubled the intake, signed up 200 firms, and this is purely investment management firms, to reiterate. Signed up 200 firms and put about 40 to 50 on a waiting list. And then they then opened up applications to students, expecting to get a couple of hundred, maybe 300 applications from students, because at this point in time, it was basically a hashtag circulating on social media with some press around it as well. Funnily enough, ended up getting 2,500 applications from students across the UK. And then fast forward through to the kind of the breakdown of who actually applied to our program. We had 59% of them come from non-Russell Group universities. And for us, that was a big win. And that actually translated into 40% of the offers. Going to the gender disparity, we had 41% of our applications come from females, people identifying as female, and that translated into 45% of the offer rate. So where that's not 50 or more, which is where we would absolutely love it to be, because women are, vastly underrepresented in these industries, it's more than double what you're classically seeing in investment management. And I'd pay big bucks, Tom, to find an investment management firm in the city with 40% of their workforce coming from non-Russell Group universities and 45% of their workforce being female. I'd pay big buck for that. And we had other industries kind of looking over the garden fence, also being interested in the playbook that we were executing. And that's how 100 Black interns within the space of a few months turned into 10,000 Black interns. And the idea of 10,000 Black interns is also pretty simple. So we aggregate that number over the course of 5 years. We have a target of 2,000 internships every year. We're open to all industries, most business streams within companies. To date, we are partnered up with 24 different sectors, 750 firms across the UK, and together they're pledging already more than 2,000 internships towards the 2022 program execution.
That's awesome. And again, in the spirit of transparency, we are a participating organization in this, which is one of the many, many, many reasons that we were super excited to bring you on and learn more. But I think there's so many lessons we can learn, right? Not just today from the experience you had with the 100 Black interns, but also in how you're approaching 10 KBI and how you're going to see the rollout happening in the next few years. And so if it's cool with you, I wanted to dig into that in a few different ways, right? And so let's split this in kind of 3 parts, right? We'll talk about kind of general internship best practice and advice. I want to dig into some of the more diversity specific topics that you've touched on a little bit so far. And then I want to talk more generally and more openly about like early in career hiring, because I think we see lots of organizations miss a trick here or kind of get this wrong. Let's talk about internships in general for a second. What's the biggest misconception you're seeing people have around internship programs in general? And I think the default in lots of more traditional industries is still to view it as somebody that makes the tea and does the photocopying exactly as you said, right? And I think from my perspective, if you're not treating it as almost like a recruitment investment and you see this as you giving something to the intern rather than them taking pain away from your admin, where do you see problems lie in the way most orgs are interpreting internships?
There definitely needs to be, and I think there is beginning to be, a shift in the view and the mentality from the firm perspective. People are approaching these opportunities with their self at the center. It's what can you as a firm give me or prove to me as
Yep.
to why I should take up this opportunity. And I feel like in years prior, it was the other way around. It was the intern or the junior hire coming in, really wanting to
Yep.
prove themselves and sell
Hmm.
themselves and work the hours. Just the other day, a friend of mine who works for, a big financial firm messaged me about a bunch of openings that they have at a firm. She basically said, "Can you circulate this amongst your network?" And I said, "Of course." I sent it into this chat. I'm talking hundreds of junior black people at the very beginning of their career. And
Hmm.
each and every one of them, without fail, said, "Absolutely not. This is slavery. I'm going to be working crazy hours. I won't have any work-life balance." People are approaching your firm with the idea that what is in it for me? Will I need therapy by the time I leave your
Yeah.
company?
Yeah. Yeah.
Will
Yeah.
I put on 10 stone because I'm working crazy hours and snacking in the middle of the night to keep myself awake?
Hmm.
Culture is so, so, so important. And I think firms really do need to shift the focus and make sure that, particularly in this hyper visible world, where if I want to find out about the culture of a firm, all I need to do is do a bit of a Google or look on LinkedIn, see what statement they put out in response to a particular world issue that I'm interested in, and boom, that gives me a snapshot into the mentality of the firm. If it agrees with what I agree with, I may apply. If it doesn't, I may not. The mentality is just so different for
Yeah.
these generations.
The power has shifted, right? As you
It
said,
has.
historically it sat with the company and now it's
Mm,
very firmly with the candidate. And I
mm,
wonder almost if there's a correlation in terms of the like broader success of a business and specifically their people play. The sooner that organizations realize that power has shifted and the earlier in the career trajectory they realize that's shifted, the better. I think we are seeing lots of organizations understand that that conversation isn't just reserved for top tier management and actually
mm-hmm.
applies early in
Everyone.
career.
Mm-hmm.
But I think your point is that it actually applies even pre that. It applies before
Absolutely.
someone applies for a job. It applies at the internship level. It
Mm-hmm.
applies at the careers fair and everything prior to that. I think if you're an Oxford undergrad, with the background that you have, maybe that conversation was true for you 10 years ago anyway, because you were a very desirable commodity. But I think now it's true of anyone in any circumstance because
Yeah,
everyone has choice,
for
right?
sure.
And I think,
Sure.
yeah, like that is a super important takeaway for me personally, is to distribute that message far and wide, right? Like
Mm,
how early do you understand that your job is to make the candidate, the intern, the person, the school student want you, not the
yeah.
other way around, right?
Yeah. And also, how early do you allow them to understand the environment within your firm is conducive to their success? There is sometimes this dissonance between the PR and the reality when
Mm-hmm.
you actually get into the firm. It's a bit of a dirty trade, right? We understand that
Mm-hmm.
firms, they have particular targets that they want to reach and particular recruitment strategies and all of the above. So even as a candidate, particularly as a diverse candidate, sometimes there can be that mentality that other people feel you're there because of your race, or you may doubt
Yep.
your own ability because of your race. You think that you are the race card or you're the person ticking that quota.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that narrative, once we actually get within these firms, there is a conversation to be had about all of those dreams you sold me before I got here.
Mm-hmm.
How true are they? Will I make associate at the same time as my white counterparts, knowing fully well that I've done the same amount of work, had the same amount of effect, worked the same hours if FaceTime culture is a thing for your firm, which it shouldn't be, but we know that there are firms out there that still operate in that way.
Mm-hmm.
These are other conversations to be had. And I think, they are difficult conversations for a number of firms to have, because what I've also come to understand is that sometimes when you're speaking to people within particular firms, they've
Yep.
got no idea what the actual firm culture is like. They've got no
Mm-hmm.
idea what it feels like to be a junior within that particular firm. And they go out
Yep.
making all these wild statements that are so far from fact.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely a conversation to be had amongst the super senior management within firms to bring them down to the flipping reality.
Well, there was a survey. I'm not going to mention the name of the firm, but there was a
Mm,
survey recently that was quite widely circulated. I don't know if you saw it, of a firm that did an internal employee engagement survey and asked about
mm,
working conditions and hours and
mm,
happiness with the role, and
mm.
the output of that was not happy reading. Frankly, was it? I don't know if you saw that online.
It goes back to the point about firm culture and
Hmm.
hypervisibility. Somebody who lives in the Sahara Desert with access to internet, and they can
Yep.
understand what it feels like to work in your firm. Certain practices need to modernize and need to become more relatable to the generation that they're trying to target.
If you're a candidate, perhaps
Hmm.
literally put yourself in your own shoes here, right? So you're looking at an opportunity and you're having a conversation and you're asking the question you asked before, right? Will I make associate at the same speed as my white counterpart with the same
Mm,
background and so on?
mm,
does anything that organization say matter, or do you just look at precedent? Are you just looking to see someone that looks and feels and acts like you, who's achieved that career trajectory in a comparable route? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
can somebody spin a tale for you, or do you just want to see somebody that's done it before?
That's definitely a question that's dependent upon who you're talking to. I think from my perspective, I'm not really interested in anything anyone has to say.
Yep.
I definitely want to see that what you are saying has been actioned. Whether in my case, in the case of other people, the numbers don't lie, eyes don't lie. If I cannot look around a firm and see somebody in a senior role that looks like me, then anything you're saying is absolute nonsense. I'm sorry.
So totally get that perspective, right? But then the
Yeah.
counter question. Let's say we're an hypothetical organization.
Yep.
There's been a cultural shift. Some leadership changes happen. So
Yep.
what it doesn't really matter. But things are changing at this company. There is no senior black leadership figure, for example, or there's no precedent to demonstrate to you that the message I'm portraying to you in terms of your progression and the equality within the organization is there. Does that organization give you comfort, confidence, allay any concerns essentially about the trajectory that's on offer for you if they've not done it yet?
Yeah, so this can be a difficult one. I completely get the angle of your question now. So you're talking in the event that there's no precedent and they're saying, look, the change starts from now. How
Might even
can
be a
they
small
give...
business that's just never got this far, right?
Yeah,
But how can they give you that comfort?
I think it's a number of things. Mentorship, sponsorship, posting, these kind of things go a very long way in somebody's career. Letting somebody know that their work, their effect, their effort is visible, acknowledged, and appreciated can give that comfort. It's so important to voice it and to voice it out in the open as well, because there are a number of unwritten rules of the city, of the corporate world, and of certain organizations that, particularly if you come from backgrounds like the background that I came from, you don't know unless you get on the wrong side of it and then realize, oh, snap, that's not how they do things here. Or I didn't do that in the best way to aid my career trajectory. That more pertains to the mentorship side, like having somebody who's been there, done that, they understand the ropes and they can mentor you through that progression. And this to be endorsed by the firm and engages their junior hires in particular, and not just leaving all of the onus on them, because it can be a very, very overwhelming to join a firm from any background, but in particular from backgrounds that are underrepresented already within that firm. Someone made a statement to me the other day that the moment somebody feels welcome within an organization, only then can they focus on their actual job. It's too much to ask for somebody to join a firm, focus on their job, do well, get yourself a mentor, make sure you have good sponsors. It's too much. It's overwhelming. They need to feel welcome. They need to feel acknowledged. They need to feel appreciated. And only then can they settle down into the role and actually focus on delivering their job description.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think we talk a lot about this just in general in terms of the importance of a proper onboarding initiative and all of the things that go. And that, to be clear, onboarding does not mean like signing your offer paperwork. It means everything around the actual welcome process, right? And making people feel comfortable. I think one final question on this, and I'm just going to bring it up because we were very lucky to be joined by Billy Shipley in a previous podcast episode. And one of the points that she made in terms of employer branding was thinking about how to get that diversity message out there and attract more of the right folks and make people feel comfortable. But also, and you sort of just alluded to this, right? Like not tokenizing people. And you said, there's consciousness sometimes that, are you the only black person in the room, or are you the only woman in technology, or are you the only X in Y? And I guess my final question in this kind of line of thinking is just, if you are that early stage organization, or you're an organization that's really looking to make some significant changes to the way that you think about recruitment, because I think there's loads and loads of organizations who have historically under-delivered and been bad agents here. But what we also need to do is plot a course for them to self-correct, right? And so for organizations that are going through this transitional phase, how do you get, maybe the lone person of color or the lone XYZ person, LGBTQ individual, the lone woman in technology. How do you, I guess it sounds the wrong word, but how do you leverage those individuals to get that message out and to give people that comfort without feeling like you're abusing them, if that makes sense?
I completely understand the question, and it's a really difficult one that I'm not even sure I have a solid answer to, because there are going to be some, black people or some women or some people in the LGBTQ community who don't want to be the face of the matter. They just want to
Absolutely.
focus on their career.
Hmm.
And, to a certain extent, it's not fair to have to leverage them all the time, particularly because, they will be a minority within the firm. So you don't really have many options from a firm perspective. So it's a kind of double-edged sword. The firm knows that they don't have much resource, but, there are other resources out there that firms can leverage outside of, choosing the token black person within the firm or the
Yep.
token woman in the
Yep.
industry to address these issues. For sure. But it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one,
Yeah,
Tom.
no, it is, and that's what. And thank you for the answer. That's why I asked the question, right? Like we want different perspectives here because
Yeah.
these are touchy, sensitive subjects. And I get, you talk about post George Floyd being asked all the time to educate individuals on racism, and I get that, but it sort of also frustrates me because you're not just a black person, right?
Yeah,
You're
exactly. It's
also
more
a
to
program
me.
director, and you're also a
Yeah.
theologist, and you're also this and that, and just being asked to allocate your time to educate people on race
Yeah.
issues when there's countless books and other material, obviously very well-intended questions, but this is why I'm trying to pull this stuff out, right? You alluded to the fact before that perhaps some organizations that are viewing this as admin or they can't afford to pay for people aren't good quality fits, perhaps, let's just say, for an internship initiative. Like, what does that look like in practice? Is there a tipping point? Is there a threshold? Is there like a stage of organization you should be at before you start thinking about rolling out an internship initiative?
No, not at all. Not at all. We have
Okay.
everything from the biggest players in the game to the middle players to the smaller players. I'm talking size-wise across the
Hmm.
24 different sectors that are represented. We have, even within investment management, companies of 5 people who are
Sure.
offering 5 internships under the program. Do you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
as long as a firm can meet the basic criteria of the program, because there
Yep.
are intersections between these issues, we have the issue of representation, we have the issue of forms of neo modern day slavery,
Yep.
all of
Yep.
these things can be inextricably linked. And as a
Hmm.
program, we're making sure that the very basic right that every person has with regards to going into an internship is met.
For people looking to run an internship initiative, like, is there guidance or data or anything you guys have gleaned from the process you've run so far around the optimal length of an internship program? And, what are you seeing in terms of people actually paying? Are people sticking at that living wage level or are people
Oh,
paying
yeah.
market?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would definitely say that the vast majority of firms, they already have set internally their junior hire salaries, for example, and they just
Hmm.
pro rata that for the course of the internship, whether it's
So
six
they're
weeks
paying
or
market
longer.
rate.
Exactly. So we have firms
Great.
paying market rate. So
Yeah.
that is definitely the norm. In terms of the duration of the internship, I'll definitely say that the vast majority are sticking to that 6 weeks, but we have
Hmm.
a lot of them actually, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, months. It depends what is possible from the student perspective, because of course, whilst we're open to graduates as well, they are able to take up opportunities that are much longer than that 6 weeks. And we have quite a few examples of internships lasting much longer than the base that we have set on the program.
In terms of the post-internship experience, right? So
Mm,
you've run your first internship cohort or your 50th, it doesn't really matter. You've given, hopefully, the people participating a fantastic experience and they've kind of got to grips with your employer brand and they're happy
mm,
with that.
mm.
What should you be doing as an organization to maximize the value of that engagement, right? Like, are people just letting these candidates fall back into the nether and they're never communicating with them again? Should they be talent pipelining? Should they be keeping in touch with them? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is our first year of execution, so it's definitely something that we're keeping our eye on very closely. We have interns going into industry from now. But yes, it's super important to maintain a pipeline. I was in conversation actually with one of our participating firms just yesterday. And of course, there's the whole conversation about, one, how do you structure a good internship? Two, how do you structure a good virtual internship? They've set up gift packages that they're sending out to each of the interns prior to them joining to make them feel welcome. It will have personalized video messages from the CEO and from their managers, and just information about where they can access cheap monitors and all of it's just absolutely fantastic in terms of making sure that they are targeting the candidates from every step of the pipeline. And this particular firm as well interviewed every single one of the candidates that were on their candidate slate. Those that
Yep.
didn't get an opportunity with the firm, they gave them further training. That is a neglected part of the pipeline. I love a firm that will look at that candidate pool and say, we've rejected you now, but it may be a yes later on down the line, and we're going to help you increase the chances of that becoming a yes later on down the line. And then at that point in time, you will be an asset to the firm, and hopefully we will be an asset to your life and your career trajectory as well. A situation where it does roll over into full-time offer and they keep that pipeline going, that's a win for everybody. it's a win for us all.
And I think, so we talk more generally about talent pipeline all the time, right? And the importance of doing that. And I think sometimes I worry that people listen to these things and they go, oh, that sounds like a lot of effort. Or, oh my God, do I have to give feedback to everybody and I have to send them this and I have to send them. But the reality is that if you take a proper long-term view and you actually look at talent strategically, which is what everybody needs to be doing to be like at all competitive in today's market, this is the cheapest and like most cost and time effective recruitment you could ever imagine, right? Do you want to be going to the careers fair and having a tiny stall with another 1,000 firms competing for the same 5 seconds of attention? Or do you want to own that person immediately because you've given them such an incredible experience, whether you've hired them or not, right? And I think you made the point that maybe some organizations aren't in a position to offer a full-term position post internship right now, and like from my perspective that's fine, but what you are in a position to do is offer a full-term quality internship experience and a full-term quality engagement with that individual, and by the time they're ready for an employment opportunity, maybe you are too. And so like I think there's so much and so great to hear from some of your kind of real world experience there.
And it's free marketing as well, Tom. It's free marketing. If you treat a candidate well, whether or not they get an offer, they're going to speak well of you to their peers. And that is free marketing, and it costs so much for all of these ads and all these different platforms. Just treat people well and they'll speak well of you and the word will spread.
It's almost like little virality, right? Like these people speak to one another incredibly quickly. When everybody comes back to school or back to college or whatever after their internship phase, are we thinking they're not talking about the quality of the experience they were offered? Are we thinking that authentic message isn't finding its way into the market? Like all the points you made before, this is the lowest hanging fruit available. And I appreciate that the payback horizon might be slightly longer than conventional recruitment marketing, but this has to form part of your strategy, right?
Absolutely. There are a number of firms that I deliberately did not apply to after hearing experiences from other, students at university.
Yeah, no question, right? No question at all. And I think that is gold to understand as an organization, right? So we've done interns, we've done sort of the diversity play and the importance of that and having everybody really understand the roots of the problem here. And I'm sure we'll circle back there later. But let's touch on, again, a more broad look at early in career hiring in general, right? Like we understand that some organizations are splitting early in career and kind of experienced professionals and approaching that very differently. Is there a tipping point where that needs to happen? Like, do organizations hit a certain size where they need a dedicated approach for both sets of the market, or can they do everything with like a one-size-fits-all approach?
Anything worth doing is worth doing well. There will be differences between hiring at those two stages. So if you do have dedicated teams to focus on those individual experiences, then that's a good thing. What is not a good thing is for there to be no conversation and no link between those two teams, because one is inextricably linked to the other. If you're having a good experience and you're doing well at the early career hiring stage, it makes the experience hire stage much more possible, because then it brings into the conversation the matter of retention. I'm working for X firm and I've had a terrible experience in that industry, and I leave after 1 year without filling out the graduate program. That's not just bad for the firm that I've left. That's also bad for other firms who would have been relying upon me having a good experience in that industry, such that I stay within that career, stay wanting to pursue a trajectory in that career, and I'm then in the position to be an experienced hire, whether at whatever level that may be. So I definitely think that it's good to have tailored approaches to those different stages, but there needs to be very strong communication and a very strong relationship between those two teams, because you can't operate in silos. And I think that's where things lapse.
One of the things I'd love to get a view from you on is what are these early in career people looking for from an employer brands and from this process? We had spoken to an organization a long time ago, sort of, again, fairly large scale, fairly traditional financial services organization that had gone through not a hiring freeze, but they were sort of very proud of the fact that their retention was extremely good, right? And they had a lot of people that had worked for this organization for like 20 to 30 years. And they hit a point where all of a sudden a lot of these 20 to 30 year tenure people were approaching retirement, and they needed to kind of backfill and fill the ranks, right? And they had this like void within the organization where everybody was like 45 and they didn't really know how to position themselves, and they spent a lot of time and effort and money framing their employer brand, talking about all the benefits. They interviewed all the team they have and asked why they'd stayed there for 30 years. And then they built a careers site and a sort of recruitment marketing strategy off the back of that. And they found that they attracted absolutely no young people whatsoever because the message about I've been here for 30 years and I love it and I get my 24
horrible.
days holiday and I got a golf trip and a gold watch when I retired, not going to fly, right?
Yeah.
And I think for organizations that may have a bit of a gulf on the kind of millennial and Gen Z front, like what is that message? What are people looking for? What's going to resonate with that audience?
People in my generation and below are approaching firms with the mentality of what am I going to gain from this opportunity?
Yep.
When I decide to leave this firm, which for many people in my generation is not in 10 years, it's not in 20 years, it's in 2.
Yep.
1 or 2, maybe 3 to 5 years, if you're lucky, someone who has much more of a long-term view.
Yep.
Will I leave this place better than I came? What they really need to focus on is what can we as a firm offer this person? Will they have a good work-life balance? Will they still be able to do the things that they love? Because we are generation side hustle. Everybody is doing something outside of the day job and they want time to be able to focus on that. And if they don't have a side hustle, they have a family or they have a hobby, certain things that keep their mental well-being even intact. And that's another big, I feel like it's a buzzword these days. Every firm is talking about mental health, but the realities of it start at the recruitment level as well. What are you doing as an organization to ensure that whilst we encourage our people to work hard, we are also ensuring that they can come to the table with all of their energy, all of their strength, with their mental health intact, such that they can be an asset to the firm in the first place. So I do think that there needs to be a focus on that.
I think the last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up is just the role of educational backgrounds in hiring teams, right? I think a lot of, not specifically with 10KPI, but like a lot of what we talk about when we think about bringing a more diverse pool of folks into organizations and others across the world is not just color or gender or LGBTQ and any of those sorts of things. It's also educational background and skills and discrimination and bias in that arena, right? And so really interested in kind of understanding if you're seeing any patterns or trends from the organizations you're working with in terms of their view of where they're looking for talent, I guess.
I would be a liar if I said that there aren't still firms with kind of target institutions, like if you're not Oxford or Cambridge. And it's something that, again, as a program, we're very focused on navigating away from. Hence why, when describing the demographical breakdown of those that applied to the program, the focus for us, something that we're really proud about, is the fact that 59% of the applications were from non-Russell Group universities and 40% of the offers went to those from non-Russell Group universities.
Yeah.
I think there's this study that I was kind of taking note of earlier, put out by McKinsey a few years ago, and they said that, with diversity of thought, with diversity of background, education, race, sexuality, comes diversity of opinion, of course, and through diversity of opinion actually leads to better decisions within teams and within boards and all of the above. So not only is this level of diversity good for the sense of belonging and people's well-being, it's actually good for business. So if you're a hard-stoned, hard-heart person that actually couldn't give two flying monkeys about how many people on your team are from the LGBTQ community or are from a Black community or whatever,
it's just good for business, right?
Yeah. If you're the one that only cares about the money, then you should care about this as a result of caring about the money, because it directly leads to higher profits, higher margins, better decisions, better governance even, and more complicity with the law. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day. What she informed me of is a study that was done by, I think it's Yale, and said that actually companies who have more diverse boards and more diverse leadership teams have the least instances of fraud. It's good for absolutely everything outside of, me as a Black person entering a firm and feeling welcome. If that's not important to you, the other stuff absolutely should be.
Yeah, it just makes commercial sense beyond your desire for a diverse workforce anyway, right?
Absolutely.
This is important to me, right? And I think the dynamic between us is super interesting because you're like a genius Oxford graduate and I left school at 16 to set up a little business, right? And so I think I look at this through a slightly different lens as well, right? And I think because we have people here at Pinpoint from Oxbridge and other very high quality education institutions as well, and we all play super nicely together, it's fine. But don't just look at non-elitist educational institutions, let's just say, and sort of cream of the crop organizations, but also look at the millions and tens of millions of people who don't have a degree at all, and look at the role that they play in the workforce. The organizations that are making a degree a requirement for applying for a role immediately screen out 68% of African Americans. They're screening out 79% of Latinx. 73% of people who live in rural communities, right? These are big numbers, right? 2/3 of people that leave the military or are veterans. These people are incredibly smart, skillful people. And I think it's really important that we all start to question the validity of some of these fairly archaic hiring processes in terms of, I understand why it's just an easy screen, but there are so many other ways now to screen candidates out and to review people en masse, and there's tools and there's processes and there's tricks to do so. When you were getting 1,000 CVs through the post every day, I get why looking for a degree at the top of it was an easy way of moving that list down. But there's better ways. It's lazy. There's better ways of doing this now. And I would really encourage organizations to learn from this conversation, but also just to open their bloody eyes and realize that it shouldn't be a requirement anymore.
Absolutely. You won't be surprised to hear that it's definitely come up in conversation in terms of the ways that we can consider expanding the program. And those options come as part of the eligibility criteria, Does it have to be people with a degree? Can we look at people on the wrong side of the law? I absolutely agree. And actually, some of the smartest people I know have gone to supposedly non-target, not so good universities, or, didn't do well in their academic experience, but actually they're absolute whizzes when it comes to actual life. I mean, formal education is one thing, but being good at life is a completely different thing.
No, and look, some of the smartest, most inspiring people in our team fit that background, right? And so, reminded of that every day. Well, look, Esther, this has been great. It's been eye-opening. It's been inspiring. It's been super relevant to stuff that every organization's sort of challenged with these days. So thank you for sharing your own experience. Thanks for talking to us about 10KPI, and thanks for answering the questions. Really appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me. And super excited to keep working with you. I know you didn't mention, but Pinpoint are obviously building out our ATS system. So big shout out to you guys for that. It's been great so far.
We're really proud to work with organizations like 10KPI. These issues are personal to us, right? And these are things that we can help very large scale technical organizations recruit more engineers, but that's not the only thing that recruitment and talent is good for, right? And so
absolutely.
No, really appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Thank you for joining us. And I think to everybody else, for more great kind of tales from the trenches and best practice guidance, please stay tuned to the Talent Revolution, right? We've got great quality content just like this coming at you every Tuesday. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening.